26-year-old Brazilian influencer Izabela Paiva is famous for showing off her lavish lifestyle on social media, but she's now at the center of news stories for allegedly ordering a gang hit on 2 men who robbed her house in Porto Velho. Paiva was out of town when her home was burglarized, but instead of calling the police, she sought revenge and the return of her stolen property by using her close ties with the Comando Vermelho, or Red Command gang. According to investigators, she told the assassins to torture the victims first. Although it's unclear if those orders were followed, she was taken into custody last week during an organized crime operation, but authorities have released few details about the case, including the items that were stolen from Paiva's home and whether any other suspects were arrested. Number 19. Brandon Alvarez. An Arizona man is accused of killing his stepfather in a fit of rage over an internet outage, landing him behind bars on a second-degree murder charge. Police responded to the family's home after receiving a 911 call from 31-year-old Brandon Alvarez, who confessed to shooting 57-year-old Juanarius Moreno. Officers arrived to find Moreno dead from multiple gunshot wounds, and Alvarez was arrested after investigators determined that he did not pose a threat to the victim at the time of the shooting. According to court documents, other household members called Moreno to deal with the situation after their internet was cut out because they knew Alvarez would be angry about it. But Moreno was upset that Alvarez had been using the internet for free and went to confront him in the backyard. Moreno was unarmed but walked toward his stepson in an aggressive manner, at which point Alvarez pulled a gun and fired 4 times. Alvarez was booked into the Maricopa County Jail but is no longer at the facility for unspecified reasons. Number 18. Kermit Thomas Kip Hart III. After spending 24 hours in jail for allegedly strangling his girlfriend, an Alabama police captain has been placed on administrative leave while the case plays out in court. 57-year-old Kermit Thomas Hart III, who works for the Tuscaloosa Police Department, was arrested last week after a domestic incident involving his partner. The female victim accused Hart of trying to choke her after she confronted him about messages to other women. She had no visible throat markings, but there was dry blood underneath her nose. Hart denied choking his partner and accused her of being the aggressor, claiming that she hit him first and that he only covered her mouth to stop her from yelling. He was released from the Tuscaloosa County Jail after posting a $5,000 bond and is now facing a felony domestic violence charge. Number 17. Michael Dutkiewicz. In a case that we previously covered on this channel, a Pennsylvania man has been found guilty of killing his ex-girlfriend just minutes after she broke up with him. After months of weighing the decision, 25-year-old Elisa Weist ended her 2-year relationship with 27-year-old Michael Dutkiewicz in May at their West Conshohocken home after a night out drinking. According to prosecutors, Dutkiewicz spent the next few minutes researching how to shoot a gun before opening fire on Weist with her own revolver. Emergency responders arrived at around midnight to find Weist face down on the sidewalk with gunshot wounds to the torso. She had fled from the residence screaming in an attempt to escape from Dutkiewicz, but hadn't gotten too far. By the time police arrived, Dutkiewicz had fled the scene. He turned himself in after learning that a warrant had been issued for his arrest and was convicted of first-degree murder last week following a 3-day trial. Although he's awaiting formal sentencing, the charge carries an automatic life sentence without parole. Number 16. Keon King. Last week we talked about the disappearance of 23-year-old Kada Scott, who mysteriously vanished earlier this month from the senior living facility in Philadelphia where she works. Scott remains missing, but a suspect has been charged in connection with the case. According to law enforcement, 21-year-old Keon King was the last person to see Scott before she disappeared. While it's unclear how the two knew each other, investigators believe they came into contact with one another in the days before she walked out of her workplace and never returned. Police also think that King and Scott had made plans to meet very shortly after Scott left the building. On Wednesday, the authorities announced that King had been arrested on suspicion of kidnapping and recklessly endangering another person. He's being held on a $2.5 million bond as the investigation continues. In the meantime, investigators are getting closer to finding answers as tips continue to pour in, with help from the public leading to the recent discovery of a vehicle connected with the case. Number 15. Anthony Caruso. Unnerving surveillance footage of a New Jersey mother's final moments alive in Miami Beach surfaced last week courtesy of local news outlets. The unsuspecting victim, 67-year-old Elizabeth Caruso, had traveled to Florida in July to perform a welfare check on her mentally ill son, 40-year-old Anthony Caruso. In the video, she could be seen checking into the hotel, which is located across the street from Anthony's apartment building. Later that evening, footage from Anthony's building showed him looking into a blood-covered garbage chute across the hall from his apartment. Police responded to the residence at the request of Elizabeth's son-in-law, who hadn't been able to reach her for 6 hours. Officers found Elizabeth's nearly decapitated body in a dumpster along with a trail of blood leading from Anthony's apartment to the garbage room. The victim had sustained several broken bones, indicating the level of violence she experienced as she took her last breath. Anthony was taken into custody following an 8-hour standoff with law enforcement and remains held without bail on a second-degree murder charge. Number 14. Daisy Link. 30-year-old Daisy Link first made news headlines in late 2023 when she got pregnant by a male inmate while in pre-trial detention in Miami. She was awaiting trial for killing her longtime boyfriend and the father of her 2 older children, Pedro Jimenez, when she announced that she was expecting a child with John DePaz, who had passed his semen-filled glove to Link through a vent. The two had never met face-to-face but had developed a bond by communicating between cells. Link was found guilty of second-degree murder following a jury trial last week, squandering any hope she might have had for raising her youngest child, who is in the care of relatives. The verdict came despite the defendant's claim that Jimenez was abusive and that she killed him by accident while attempting to fire a warning shot. She's currently awaiting a pre-sentencing hearing, which is scheduled for November 21st and is facing anywhere from 10 years to life behind bars. Number 13. Ender Alexis Rojas Montan, a notorious Tren de Aragua gang leader's fall to his death, was captured in a video that surfaced last week, revealing the career criminal's unceremonious final moments. 31-year-old Ender Alexis Rojas Montan, who headed the gang's Aleon dynasty branch, was hiding out in an 8th-story apartment in Antioquia, Colombia, earlier this month when the police came to apprehend him as officers charged at the front door with a battering ram. He attempted to scale the outside of the building by climbing down to the balcony below, but he lost his grip and plunged face-first into the concrete sidewalk below. While the unusual fatality brought an unexpected close to Montan's case, 3 other suspects were arrested at the scene. Venezuelan nationals Luis Alberto Cabeza Calderon, Jonathan Samuel Urbina Rodriguez, and Davians Del Jesus Moya Avia avoided making the same unwise choice as Montan and gave themselves up to the authorities without incident. In addition to having ties with some of Tren de Aragua's top-ranking members, the trio are accused of managing the gang's drug distributions, extortion networks, and sex trafficking operations. Number 12. Rachel and Brandon Dumovich. Authorities have established the cause of death of an Illinois couple whose marital bliss ended abruptly earlier this month when they were found deceased in their car under suspicious circumstances just days before their first anniversary. A police officer made the discovery after spotting a vehicle with its hazard lights on in Harvard. Inside the car were the bodies of 29-year-old Rachel Dumovich and 30-year-old Brandon Dumovich, who had tied the knot less than a year earlier. While final autopsy results are pending, law enforcement revealed last week that the pair had both suffered gunshot wounds and that a firearm was found inside the vehicle. The investigation is ongoing, according to Harvard Police Chief Tyson Borman, who told Fox News that certain scenarios are being considered, but no final determination has been made. Number 11. Michael Benjamin. A Georgia man has been extradited to New York in connection with a nearly 30-year-old string of unsolved attacks on women in southeast Queens. At least 5 victims were brutally assaulted and robbed, in some cases at gunpoint, by a home intruder between 1995 and 1997. Investigators finally caught up with the suspect, 57-year-old Michael Benjamin, in Conyers, Georgia, in late September, thanks to DNA that they had surreptitiously collected from a discarded cup. The sample turned up as a match to evidence the attacker left behind at the crime scenes, where he drank and ate the victim's food before leaving. Benjamin arrived in the Big Apple on Wednesday and was booked on charges of first-degree rape, first-degree sexual assault, and first-degree burglary. He could be heard proclaiming his innocence while being taken into court on Thursday, and his attorney argued that the crimes Benjamin is accused of have exceeded the statute of limitations. Prosecutors refuted the claim by arguing that the statute of limitations does not apply to the case because Benjamin was pre-indicted on charges relating to the attacks before it could run out. The outcome remains to be seen. Number 10. Pamela Genini. 29-year-old Italian model and businesswoman Pamela Genini was brutally murdered at her Milan apartment last Tuesday, and her ex-partner is the accused killer. According to investigators, 52-year-old Gianluca Soncin entered the residence late at night using a duplicated key and proceeded to stab Genini at least 24 times. Neighbors overheard Genini screaming for help, but by the time emergency responders arrived, it was too late to save her. Police discovered the young woman's body on her balcony while Soncin was found suffering from a life-threatening slash wound to the throat. Soncin survived his injuries and will now have to answer in a court of law for the allegations against him. Authorities believe he murdered Genini in a fit of rage after she ended their relationship, and he now faces charges of aggravated homicide and femicide. Genini's loved ones reportedly told police that the victim had feared for her safety prior to her death and that she wanted to move in order to avoid further interaction with Soncin. Number 9. Elizabeth Hernandez. A recently obtained criminal complaint is shedding light on the murder of a Florida man whose unclothed body was found beneath a hotel room bed last year. Jason Anderson's remains were discovered by a maintenance worker who had been dispatched to the room at the Holiday Inn Express in Miami to repair a phone line behind the bed. An autopsy found evidence of blunt force trauma, facial lacerations, and bite marks, indicating that Anderson had met a violent end. Investigators traced the crime to 39-year-old Elizabeth Hernandez, who was seen carrying bags full of bedding out of the hotel. According to police, she used the victim's stolen debit card to drain $6,000 from his bank account, leaving the balance at zero. 2 witnesses have been identified and interviewed, but have not been charged in connection with the case. Records show that Hernandez is being held without bond at the Turner Guilford Night Correctional Center on suspicion of first-degree murder, third-degree grand theft, and fraudulent use of a credit card. Number 8. Thomas and Agatha Perkins. 68-year-old Thomas Perkins and his 66-year-old wife Angela died under mysterious circumstances in a small plane crash in Dartmouth, Massachusetts, last Monday. The aircraft slammed onto Interstate 195 during the morning rush hour and burst into flames amid 55-mile-per-hour gusts of wind. Investigators believe the Rhode Island couple may have been attempting to land the plane at the nearby New Bedford Regional Airport, but they didn't provide air traffic controllers with a flight plan or any other pertinent information, including the number of souls aboard. They were en route to Kenosha, Wisconsin, in a plane registered to a medical non-profit called the Air Charity Network, despite no flights to that destination being scheduled that day. Authorities are reportedly working to determine why the Perkins were flying the aircraft without the owner's knowledge. In the meantime, officials are releasing limited details about the deadly accident due to the ongoing government shutdown. Number 7. Bucharest Explosion. 3 people were killed and at least 13 others were injured on Friday when an explosion tore through 2 stories of an apartment building in the Romanian capital of Bucharest. More than a dozen emergency vehicles descended on the scene, where the 5th and 6th floors of an 8-story complex had been destroyed. The gas supply to the area was cut off as a safety precaution, but the cause of the deadly blast was not immediately clear. Residents were evacuated from the building and nearby schools, and over a dozen survivors were taken to the hospital. One of the deceased victims was found beneath a concrete slab on the 6th floor, and the investigation and cleanup are reportedly ongoing. Number 6. Eddie Jawad. In a harrowing ambush that was captured on video, 61-year-old gas station tycoon Eddie Jawad was shot by a mystery gunman outside his Macomb Township, Michigan home last Tuesday. He was pulling out of his driveway in his SUV when a hooded assailant emerged from between 2 parked vehicles and opened fire on the victim. The suspect continued to shoot and chased after the SUV while Jawad drove across his front lawn in a desperate attempt to escape the gunfire and fired a warning shot, prompting the gunman to flee the scene. Jawad went to the hospital where he was treated for a non-fatal bullet wound to the leg, while the shooter remains at large. He waited outside the property for nearly an hour leading up to the attack and fled in a black Range Rover. While the motive behind the crime is unclear, Jawad's wife told the Daily Mail that it was not a robbery. Jawad has no idea who would want him dead or why, but has already returned to work as the investigation continues. Number 5. Demitri Marshall. A New York City man was arrested last Monday for slashing a stranger after being released following his arrest for a similar crime the previous month. 32-year-old repeat offender Demitri Marshall is accused of attacking a 27-year-old victim outside a subway station on Manhattan's Lower East Side after prosecutors failed to convince a judge to impose bail for stabbing another victim in the Bronx just weeks earlier. The judge in the previous case, Ralph Wolf, sprung Marshall loose after the defendant shouted out in court that he didn't have bail money. Wolf advised Marshall to comply with supervised release and stay out of trouble, but he paid little mind to those warnings when he approached his second victim from behind and slashed the man's face, resulting in a laceration that required 7 stitches. Marshall fled the scene and was arrested several hours later on a felony assault charge and is being held without bail as his cases play out in court. He's reportedly been arrested 7 times since his release from Sing Sing prison in 2024, leaving his most recent victim feeling outraged that he was free to commit his latest attack in the first place. Number 4. Aaron Oldham and Christine Hillier. An Oklahoma man is facing allegations that he impersonated an attorney so he could visit his girlfriend in jail. The incident occurred last Monday when 41-year-old Aaron Oldham showed up at the Oklahoma County Detention Center and tried getting power of attorney paperwork signed for his girlfriend, 41-year-old Christine Hillier, who had been arrested the previous week on a warrant out of Nevada. According to the authorities, he indicated that he had legal training and referred to Hillier as his client. The visit was granted, but employees became suspicious when they saw the pair hugging and kissing, prompting a closer look at Oldham's credentials, or lack thereof rather. After discovering that he doesn't have a license to practice law enforcement arrested him on a false personation charge. Oldham chalked the situation up to a misunderstanding, while a spokesperson for the jail blamed the incident on an employee's failure to properly verify the visitor's identity. The staff member was disciplined for the mistake, and the facility's workers have been retrained on the jail's visitation policies. Number 3. Donald Wayne Rownan. A Washington man who's accused of killing a young woman during a high-speed police chase on Wednesday is reportedly blaming law enforcement for the fatality. 47-year-old Donald Wayne Rownan refused to comply with a traffic stop in the Tacoma suburb of Parkland, where police attempted to pull him over after discovering active warrants for his arrest. He sped through an intersection during the ensuing pursuit and fatally struck a Toyota Corolla being driven by 20-year-old Paula Pabol Arredondo. Rownan tried to flee on foot but was promptly apprehended by law enforcement just blocks away from the scene. At the time of the accident, he was on parole for charges stemming from one of his previous 36 arrests and had been released from prison just months earlier. He later admitted that he fled from the police because he didn't want to return to prison for violating the terms of his supervision, and he suggested that law enforcement was at fault for Arredondo's death because they could have chosen not to chase after him. Rownan has pleaded not guilty to a multitude of charges, including second-degree murder, vehicular homicide, vehicular assault by DUI, and failure to remain at an accident resulted in death. He's reportedly in custody with bail set at $750,000. Number 2. Jalen and Charla Pendergrass. A 49-year-old Michigan woman named Charla Pendergrass and her 23-year-old son, Jalen, are facing charges for the murder of Jalen's teenage girlfriend and going to great lengths to conceal the crime. The victim, London Thomas, was last seen at Jalen's residence in Inkster in April of this year. Her whereabouts remained a mystery until about a month later when a friend of Charla's called law enforcement and said that they had recently helped Charla move a heavy plastic container. Acting on the tipster's information, police paid a visit to a home in Southfield where they found Thomas's remains stuffed in a plastic container inside an SUV. Charla and Jalen were arrested last week and are each facing 1 count of second-degree murder and 1 count of tampering with evidence. The judge remanded Jalen without bail after considering his recent criminal history, which includes a recent DUI arrest while out on bond for a previous crime, and Charla's bail was set at $5 million. Number 1. Michael Phillips. An elderly Florida man was a sight for sore eyes after being beaten down by the husband of a woman he was harassing in Grand Island. 76-year-old Michael Phillips was arrested in Lake County last week after sheriff's deputies responded to a reported shooting where they found a female victim suffering from a gunshot wound to the forearm. Also at the scene was the accused shooter, 76-year-old Michael Phillips, who was suffering from obvious facial injuries. According to witnesses, the victim and her husband were loading their dog into their car when Phillips approached and asked if he could go inside their house to play cards. As he entered the home, he called the woman a derogatory name and shot her. The woman's husband rushed to her defense and Phillips was quickly disarmed. Phillips reportedly claimed that the gun had discharged accidentally when someone tried taking it from him. He's been held at the Lake County Jail on an aggravated battery with a deadly weapon charge in lieu of $25,000 bail.